Welcome to Dualistic Unity with Andrew and Ray. This is Andrew.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Ray. So this is our very first conversation. Welcome to the podcast. Just to give you a bit of history, Andrew and I have only known each other or known of each other for the last couple of weeks. I had the pleasure of running across Andrew's content on TikTok, and it just blew my mind. The fact that he was so clear and concise about the insights that he was having, and his intention to spread those insights for the joy that it might bring other people. So in wanting to spread that message a little bit more, of course, that my own content is of a similar fashion. So I contacted Andrew and we started talking. We had one interview, which you can find on my YouTube channel, and we've spoken briefly twice since then. So this podcast, as it goes on, is going to be a journey of Andrew and I learning from each other and learning about each other. So as a listener, I hope that you enjoy the show, and please do submit any questions or comments that you have to us on social media so that we can include you in these conversations as we move forward.
Certainly. Yeah. And just to give my perspective on finding Ray, about 2 months ago, I started having sorts of insights. It started with realizing that I don't have a past to the degree that I think that I do. And this idea of what if I didn't have a past? And then it's like, holy shit, if I don't have a past, then maybe I'm not Andrew and I'm not confined to this body. I'm just aware of it and aware of its environment. So I'm not Andrew, I'm aware of Andrew, or I got to sort of the present awareness of Andrew, no past, no future, just present awareness. And I was talking to some friends about this, and one of them who I was talking to sent me a couple of videos, and he was like, yo, this kind of sounds like what you're talking about. And it was a video of Ray from 2005 talking about his experience in the forest, and that when he came out, he realized basically that there was no other, and everyone he was meeting was just himself. And I was like, whoa, holy shit, that's exactly what I've been realizing and having insights about. And so I clicked through Ray's page. I was like, wow, this dude makes a lot of sense. Followed him, started commenting on some of his stuff. Maybe he, saw that or saw my page soon after. And yeah, that's just my perspective of it. But again, super excited. Another thing I think we're going to probably touch on is just, the title Dualistic Unity, and just the differences between us and how we came to all of this and got to this podcast. And we couldn't be almost any more different on the surface of things. And yet we've come to similar insights. You started to a long time ago. I started to about 2 months ago. So very early. And I'm very grateful to have someone, like you, who I can bounce things off of, because I get a lot of questions about these things and I don't always know exactly what to say about them, quite frankly.
Yeah, I hear you for sure. I mean, if there's anything I've learned in the last 20 years, it's that the answer is actually not the point, right? It's the ever deepening question, and just that state of being in the question without settling on an answer, of just being aware, right? And without holding on to any particular concept. It's just so funny because 20 years ago, I was roughly your age. A little younger 20 years ago, but I was roughly your age. And so it's amazing to me that there's almost this window somewhere between, like, I don't know, 15, 16 and about 30, where we have a really good chance of breaking our programming. We actually have a really good chance of stepping out of what's familiar, because it hasn't kind of set into solid concrete yet. And yet when I work with clients who are older, they have such a harder time breaking those old familiar habits, because they are so familiar, because they are so set in stone over time. So when I ran across your channel, and again, you're on point and you're enthusiastic, I just had to reach out, because that needs to be encouraged. It needs the flames of that enthusiasm need to be fanned. They need to be spread, and they need to be spread more so now than any other time that I've seen in my life. Like when I first started waking up back 20 years ago, it was right after 9/11, right? So everything had changed. The entire world suddenly had become vastly more shut off. And I was waking up in that, trying to talk to people about this. And there was a few, not many, but the majority was just get back into line. Like, this doesn't make me feel safe. I want to feel safe. Stop talking about all these questions, and let's just settle on what we're supposed to do. Just get to work, Ray, was often what I would get. I actually had somebody around my age call me a nonconformist.
Sounds like an amazing compliment.
Right? I'm like, I happening? But that was the whole thing. And it's because we didn't want to question it. There was a few, but not many. And now there's so many people like you who are questioning it that I'm excited to have this conversation, Andrew. I really am. And again, the fact that you have so many questions means that I can sit here and just, basically be myself, because over the last 20 years, I've more or less just settled into silence for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I love
Yeah.
talking to people, but when I'm on my own, I talk to myself, and it's just as good, if not better.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the time period between 15 to 30, because it seems like after that sort of 30, even I'm getting to the point now with friends that I've had a couple of conversations in the last 2 months, and they haven't really gone anywhere. Some of them have, and I've like sort of broken through some understandings, but some of them it's not even close. And it seems like after that, 25, 30-year-old mark, whenever it is, that people just start saying that's just the way it is when you start asking questions. And that response, it's just the way it is, has been becoming more and more interesting to me. And it's like, is it though? Is it really? Is it the way it is?
Let's talk
or
about that a bit. Yeah.
do you just don't want to get into it, and you want to, again, stay safe and comfortable, and seemingly this illusion of sturdiness or whatever
Stability. That's it, right?
Exactly.
And it's a shame because we often don't recognize that our discomfort, our suffering, our conflict comes from that desire to stagnate. It comes from that desire to just settle on something and kind of nest until death. And Krishnamurti did a really good job of explaining this visual, that living in the moment is very much like just being in the river, whereas settling on a concept, on an answer, and an identity is like making a pool off to the side of the river that just stagnates and eventually turns to sludge. And that's very much the point, because if we're not constantly being refreshed in the moment, we start to die inside, right? We start to come into conflict with everything. All of a sudden, everything around us is the problem, because we no longer have this constant renewable source of insight. And so
Yeah.
it's difficult, and it's interesting that you're seeing that already, because and I know from when I was in my 20s, it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating to see more and more of my friends settling for the cheap high of egotistical superiority.
Yeah. Been seeing quite a bit about that. And I'm not, I never describe myself as controversial, but recently it seems like, based on responses that I get and
That
how
sounds
much,
controversial.
yeah, it's becoming, and I guess, it's fair. I've been posting about how there is no good, or like just recently, because it's so fresh, I posted a video about how there's no good or bad and everything is just perception. And I've gotten, 5 different people, at least that's what I've seen, DMs about how it always comes back to killing. And everyone's like, killing is objectively bad. And I went through, posted probably 5 videos on my Instagram story today talking about how it's still just your individual subjective perception. And there are scenarios where a lot of people would agree that killing is not bad. And at the end of the day, when it comes to good and bad, you can't see the future. So you can't know. And that's what it comes back to, is you just can't predict the future. So anything in your life, and it comes back to, there's so many things that it applies to, like worry. You're worried because you think you know what's best. And so you worry that it will happen. You hope that it will happen. You fear that it won't happen, but you don't know what's best. So you might be worrying about the best case scenario.
Yep.
And it's just, it's kind of puts your worried mind in this sort of pretzel, because all of a sudden it's like, well, shit,
What do I do?
then I guess there's no worry, right? And it's like, ding, ding, ding.
That's it. Uncertainty, oddly enough, is where you're at your best, right? And that's it. It's like, you could worry, because I had clients when I was life coaching who would say, like, okay, so what I've got to do is I've got to stop thinking this way. It's like, no, you don't have to. It's not
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you gotta. It's not that you need to. You can continue thinking the way you think right now, but you're going to continue to get the same response.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not an obligation. Don't make it a should. It's never going to work that way. It actually has to be right here, right now. Am I tired of judging myself into paralysis? Am I tired of holding on to what I think just for the sake of not feeling uncertain? And that's a tricky one. It's a catch-22, right? Because you're telling people like you will feel better about uncertainty by just embracing it. Well, that doesn't help. Like, I want to feel better. It's like it's not how that works, right? I remember one of my first posts when I was life coaching, I don't know, about 10 years ago, was the difference between feeling better and getting better, right? Because you can go to the gym, right? And if it's about feeling better, you're going to pick up the weight that's comfortable. And as soon as you get to the weight that's not, you're going to put it down. And you're not going to try and push past that at all because it doesn't feel good, does it? No. But if you want to get better, if you want to get stronger, you have to go through that discomfort. You have to pick up that heavier weight. You have to push yourself beyond your limits. And that's getting better. But everybody's so focused on trying to feel better that we never push ourselves to that next weight because I couldn't lift it today and I can't stop thinking about myself, so therefore I'm a failure and it's never going to work out. And now I have this giant narrative just because I failed to pick up that weight once.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very interesting how few want to go through that. And then, like you mentioned, with the should or the have to, it's like you give a piece of advice or something, and they're like, oh, so I should do this, or what should I do? And there are a lot of people out there who do say you should do this,
Yes.
or you have to if you want to do this. And it's like, I'm not saying you have to by any means. And I'm not even saying that you should. I'm just saying that you can if you want to. And you're the only one who can.
That's
Nobody. And that's what it comes back to. And you talk about it a lot, is the responsibility aspect of it. Like for anything, really, it comes back to the responsibility. And you don't have to take responsibility, but you will continue to suffer until you kind of realize that.
Yeah, that's it, right? It's uncomfortable as hell, but it's more uncomfortable to avoid,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's the difference between tearing off the band-aid or letting the wound fester.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't want to tear off the band-aid because then we have to look at the wound. We have to come to grips with the fact that we've been putting it off. Right. Like there's so much we have to deal with. And I remember one day I was buying weed and I was sitting at my dealer's place. This was before it was legal. And there was another guy there and he was also buying, but he was a devout Christian. And so, I had a toke, we're talking, we're doing all that. And he tells me that he hasn't been able to see his son in 20 years. And it's because he was drunk and he had a criminal record and he lost custody of his kid way back when, and that he's never going to see his kid again. I'm like, well, your kid's got to be in his 20s now. Like, surely you can reach out. He's like, no, it's just, he'd never forgive me. And, I've got to ask Jesus for forgiveness. I have to ask God to forgive me before I can do anything. And it's like, okay, so what you've done is you've justified paralysis. You've basically just said, I'm not going to do anything. And it's because the universe hasn't told me I have permission to do so. And so you're asking for forgiveness for something that you're not willing to take accountability for. Like, how can you get forgiveness or feel forgiveness if you don't forgive yourself, if you don't understand why you're here? And the response was, without even missing a beat, nope, that's beyond my ability. That's only up to Jesus. And that was the end of the conversation. And it was because I am comfortable in my discomfort. I am familiar with the devil that I know. And that's why it's called The Devil We Know, which is why I loved your video when you responded to my, admittedly, I poked that question at you because it's fun. What is the devil? And you responded, it's the illusion of separation. It's the perception of division. And that's very much true, which is why I really enjoy the biblical references to the devil as the father of lies, right? Because when you believe your idea of yourself, it's so convincing. It promises you control, just like Jesus's 40 days in the desert, right? It promises all the kingdoms of the world if you have control, if you identify, if you're morally superior. But it doesn't do anything except cause you pain and disconnection. It's that whole, I'd rather reign in hell than serve in heaven, right? I'd rather think I have control.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Yeah. And the reference to the devil, and then even you've talked a little bit about the story of Adam and Eve, which I've been very intrigued with, and taking a bite out of the apple of knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of knowledge of good and evil and whatnot. And it's it's interesting because what was the reference to the devil? The being of lies,
The father of lies.
is father of lies.
That's right.
Yeah, and going back to good and bad, the idea that there is good and bad and knowledge of good and bad or
Evil.
judgment when there is none. It's all
That's right.
this non-duality, and yet it's like the birth of this feeling of separation.
Yep.
And it was, caused by the serpent devil or whatever they say. But it has these, it's been taken so literally. And even though there's a lot of people out there who say it's just this, they admit it's just a story, they're still taking it as a literal fake story as opposed to an analogous, or whatever exactly that term is, for what it actually is, and the references and the symbolism of it, which is very, very powerful. And there's so many things and so many Jesus's teachings that have just been flip turned,
Yeah.
half-ass backwards.
Always.
That or have been taken just so literally.
Yeah.
In so many ways, and it wasn't necessarily meant to be. And I think that's what's led to a lot of the misunderstandings, it seems like.
Well, because it's interesting, right? Because you may have noticed this in the last year or even the last 2 months, but there's a switch that happens in our perception. It's almost like where we're sitting within our body changes. All of a sudden, it's not that we're, in our body looking out through our eyes, but it's almost like we're sitting behind our eyes looking out at our reality. It's almost like we're in a different state of awareness, like we've just sat in the back seat suddenly and we're looking around going, this is a fun ride. Whereas before, we couldn't even stop to admit it was a ride that was happening. We were just so involved with it. And so that perception, that switch of going from a physical body to just an awareness of subjective reality is how the Bible's encoded. I'm absolutely certain of it, is that if you can't see that you are awareness, the Bible makes no sense. I mean, look at the very first commandment. Thou shalt hold no God before me. Well, that's exactly what I would write.
Yeah.
Right?
As God.
As any awareness, I would say put no concept of God before yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what I'd write. And that's exactly what the 10 Commandments are getting at, right? Like, look at everything is, Abrahamic religion when it comes to monotheism for the most part. But there was the fact that Israel, which was the name that God bestowed, right? Which was, the whole people of Israel thing. Well, that name just means those who toil with God. Those who are in alignment with what are the people of Israel. Those are the chosen people. It has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with your genetics. It has nothing to do with anything, and everything to do with the fact that when you're in alignment with awareness, you're toiling with or as God.
Yeah.
Right? And so we just get lost in this perception. No, God's got to be this external being, dude in the sky with a list of shit that I'm not supposed to do. And it's like, that's a lovely, comforting thought. If you need to judge other people, that will justify your judgment, because then you can say, no, he judges too. Right? But that's the only purpose it has.
Yeah.
And aside from that, everything's our avoidance of death.
Yeah. It's just really just foisting that responsibility onto everything else. And it was interesting when you mentioned like that shift of awareness. I've definitely felt that in the last 2 months, this idea of, it's almost like it was like environment, and then Andrew and me are here. It's like I'm at the level of the skin or whatever. And now it's like environment, Andrew, me here. And I'm aware of both Andrew and his environment being everything else, as all as one happening. And he, rather than Andrew being the observer and the universe being the observed, I am the observer, Andrew and his environment is the observed, which is how I have seen it. But I've certainly experienced more and more almost every day this feeling of awareness of Andrew, to the point that in a lot of my videos, I'll refer to Andrew in the third person, which people find strange, but it's hard to describe, and it's even hard to explain and make. I found it difficult for a good couple weeks to make videos in the same way that I was,
Mm.
because I was using these terms so differently now. And then I realized that it's just easier to communicate through the way that it can best be received, because there is still value if you are explaining things in an identified way to people, and there is a process of getting there, I believe, certainly. So I got back to, explaining things and using my name and you, and saying it in ways that I feel like we're still separate, even though I know we're not, just to better communicate. And that's essentially it, like you've said,
It's far less confusing.
is yeah, for sure. But it's been interesting, because I did have a tough time for a little while, and my only videos for a good week after that sort of like realization was about this idea of not being the human you've been conditioned to believe that you are, and it's simply an illusion.
Yeah. Well, and that's it, right? And it's interesting. I find I go through waves, and I think you'll probably do the same, where I'll have just a span of time where all of a sudden the insights hit me over and over and over again. And people will call that a download. I just look at it as me being in a state where there's less stress and more time to just kind of relax and allow myself to absorb exactly how much I've absorbed. And then that'll go deep, and you'll get so deep into it that people will start going, okay, I'm not sure if I'm following this. And you're like, it doesn't matter. This is awesome. I'm going. And you just keep going. And then you come back a little bit later and you go, okay, now let's unpack that. Let's look at how that actually works out from the beginning to the end, because you're too busy down at the end of the road to worry about the first few steps, right? And sometimes you have to do that just to get more familiar with the path. But not everybody's going to understand you when you do that, which is great. And it's funny because like one post I made a little while ago, I don't remember, it was one of my short ones, which are usually the ones you have to watch out for, because the short ones are the ones where I'm like, oh, this is very good, and I'm just going to leave it at this. That at some point we become aware that the only thing that we are aware of is our awareness, and that the entirety of the universe that we are quote unquote aware of is our awareness. That there is nothing to us except our awareness. We don't know anything but our awareness, and we never have. Everything else is hearsay. And this is talking to people on who've explored psychedelics. I've often said, do yourself a favor next time you do that. Ask yourself, if you weren't here, would anything else be? And that just sets the tone, because normally in a sober state of mind, we just go, well, of course, and we disregard it, and that's the end of the conversation, right? But when you start looking at it and you start questioning, it's like, hold on a second. In all honesty, the only thing I know is everything from the moment that I came into existence. This could all be a dream. All of these people could just be an extension of myself. None of this could be what it appears to be. It's like, well, what about history? Still hearsay. Mm-hmm. Still hearsay, regardless of how many books or dinosaur bones or blah, blah, blah. The fact is, the only thing I know is my existence. And that conversation is what makes people go running for the hills, because that means that you are alone, right? And you are forever. That's the thing that really trips people up, and it's like, because we think of it in terms of identity. All of a sudden, it's like, this makes me feel very lonely. It's like, right, because you're still thinking about yourself as separate. Mm-hmm. That's the only place that loneliness comes in.
So this is something I don't know if I'm completely following you at this part. So, because I remember I posted a video maybe a month or so ago talking about how I'm the awareness and so are you. And I'm aware of the voice inside of Andrew's head no differently than I'm aware of a tree, or I'm aware of the ground that he is standing on no differently than I'm aware of something on his body hurting. Mm-hmm. Something like that. So the awareness stays the same. And I think you commented something like, but you are the aware of the awareness, or the awareness of that awareness. So it's like one more step. So how does that? Yeah.
So like the tree, for example, that you are aware of is aware of itself, right? The tree is aware of itself in whatever capacity that is expressed, because it's not human, so it doesn't have a human brain. It doesn't think of itself as, my tree Bob. It doesn't do that, right? But it is aware of itself. It's aware of the feeling of the sun against it. It's aware of the wind. It's aware when it loses disconnection with the roots or the ground. It's aware of these things. So the problem that we have is that we tend to separate Andrew's awareness, or the awareness of Andrew, from the awareness of the tree, right? Because as much as you're experiencing awareness of the tree is also experiencing awareness of itself, but neither Andrew or the tree are real. It's the same awareness. It's the exact same awareness. It's kind of like how mushrooms grow. Mushrooms grow from mycelium, right? Mycelium is underneath the ground, and mycelium is the reason that we have lush forests and that we have soil that's so healthy. But mushrooms themselves are actually just the fruit. They're not the plant. Mushrooms just sprout from mycelium. And so each mushroom is an expression of the same mycelium. It comes from the same place. It has the same potential. It's just expressed differently, but it's connected despite its perception of being disconnected. Right? Each mushroom is connected to the other mushrooms, even though they're not intimately aware of each other's experience. It's the same thing with all of us. We're all connected by the same mycelium. We are all the same I, right? We just have the perspective of division. So and this is something you really experience in coaching, or it's something you experience in a lot of physical therapies, where you let go of the idea of yourself and you find yourself having an intuitive connection to people. And it's because your awareness and theirs is the same awareness. It's just our holding on to the divisions that cause so much distortion and so much confusion, right? Every time you have a moment of genuine empathy with somebody, it's because your walls come down and you're able to see yourself in that person. That's the whole thing. You can see yourself in that person because you are that person. That's the whole reason. That's why you can empathize. That's why I always say that regardless of what form you take, if you can have this conversation about the relationship between the observer and the observed, you're always going to have this conversation, because it's the universal experience of everything that is aware, because everything is the same awareness.
Yeah.
Now, again, I spent 20 years and just unpacking this. And I know you're saying, like, I don't know if I fully get that. Neither do I. Yeah. What I can say is that in my moments of clarity, yeah, it rings through. The deeper it goes, the more clear I become, the more obvious it is that the entirety of reality is just one thing. It's just, when you've said it many, many times, it's difficult to let go of me. It's difficult to let go of the idea of me.
I think I'm pretty close to fully understand the idea that we're all the same thing. It's interesting, like when people will ask, well, how can we be the same? Like, is it just that strong of an illusion that I feel like, right now I'm waving Andrew's right hand and you can't wave my right hand?
Oddly enough, right? I just did.
Right. Or the thoughts inside of my head, I can hear them.
Right. And I'm hearing them as you. But you see, that's the point, right? We get caught up in the idea of you and me being separate. Like, suddenly you being able to experience yourself somehow negates the fact that you're also me. Right? You can't experience what Ray is experiencing because Ray's busy experiencing it and you're busy being Andrew. It's really tricky because, and here's the paradoxical bit, right? Because we talk about everything being one, but we're still talking physically, right? We're still talking about the division between you and me, the perception of distance, right? That there's air and oxygen and physical land between us. But reality works in a very different way than that. Like, as much as that is true, that there is the physical, there is also the completely subjective. And the subjective is that without you here, there is no observed. Without the observer, there is no observed. And this is where reality gets really tricky, right? Because when you think of it in just terms of one being, let's just break it down to one being. So the void, which is why Genesis is such an interesting story, right? So we have the void, we have nothing, or rather we have the potential for everything. It's just unity. It could be anything, but it's not currently anything. It's just potential, right? In that comes the split, the perceptual split. It's not an actual split. It's just within that potential, there's the potential for the unity to observe itself as separate, right? So now you have the subjective reality of an objective reality. You have the observer and the observed, and they create each other. They are the same thing. They're not disconnected, right? So that is reality in a nutshell. That's your existence. You are not separate from your reality. The observer and the observed are one. Your awareness is reality itself. The paradoxical bit is that everything that is in the universe comes from you being the observer of the observed. So I'm within your consciousness. Everybody else is within your consciousness. Everybody else is within your awareness, and you're within ours. And that's the paradoxical bit, is that we're all within one another's awareness, and we experience it as a physical universe. And that's how messed up this is, which is why science is having so much problems trying to explain physical distance, why everything is connected. And again, the whole multi-universe theory, or multiple timelines, or alternate realities. Because all of this stuff is real. All of it stuff is possible. Yet we can't explain why we can't just jump from one reality to another. And that's the age-old question. It's like, why? Why can't I? And it's like, is it just because I'm so committed to this? Exactly what you asked. Is it just because this seems so real? And that's what your shamans of ages past have tried to get past. That's why the indigenous tribes of Australia call this the dream time. They actually look at this as the dream time. There are tribes in Africa, same thing, that we are multidimensional travelers who got trapped in an illusion. These are all old tribal myths way before science. So it's not a new conversation, right? But it comes back down to that question of what is possible? Exactly how real is this? And if I continue to question it, does that change the influence that we have over the observed? The more we break down that division between the observer and the observed, what does that change? What is possible for us as a species, or us as an awareness, which is a better question, right? This is where magic comes in. This is where all of this interesting, mysterious stuff starts to come into the conversation, because you can't, this is where reality becomes more fun, because all of a sudden everything is questionable, right? Even the nature of our own existence. Because I'll admit, I don't know I exist. And I mean that completely. I know that there is existence. I know that I am experiencing existence, and I experience choice, but I also know that all of my choices are the result of the influences that I've had before now. And that, because of those influences altering my choice, I can't necessarily say that my choice is separate from the will of the whole. And if my choice isn't separate from the will of the whole, then there's no real me, in which case it's just the whole. And that's me. So it just keeps coming full circle back to your existence.
Yeah, that got through. I get that. I think that's something, the idea of whether or not we have free will, I think helps supplement this explanation pretty well. And the idea that there was never a choice, it seems like. It was like there were infinite possibilities, which happened, and here we are.
And here we are.
And the story you mentioned of Genesis, and how, infinite possibilities, and unified whole becoming just not separate, but this illusion of separateness, and the observer and the observed being the same thing still, but it's like, I don't know, molded maybe into this idea of, instead of being a unified whole, now it looks like a tree, and there's, leaves on one side and leaves on the other, and they're all the tree, they're all the unified whole. It just seems like, they're different because, the wind's blowing on one side, that one's moving, it thinks it's moving, but it's not. It's the wind happening, which who knows where that comes from, somewhere else, right? Probably, and the other one's not moving. So it's like, hey, I'm waving my hand over here, how can I do this and you can't wave my hand over here? And it's like, that doesn't take away from the fact that you're still the tree. And so I think, the idea of, so when it comes to free will, because I think I've heard you talk about how, like, we do and we don't, from the idea of being a unified whole, there was an infinite, possibilities, and we we it I don't know what the term is, created an illusion of separateness, or illusion of separateness manifested, and
Here we are.
years and years and years, etc. Here we are.
I can't tell you
And
how much I enjoy the fact that you're experiencing my hell in trying to communicate this with language. So I just wanted to say that this is exactly how I feel, and the reason I've been so quiet for so long is
yeah,
because it's not an easy subject,
yeah,
right?
it's
It's
fun
really
though.
not. It is fun.
I
Well, that's it. It's fun, but it requires courage. It requires a good deal of courage to even entertain the idea that there aren't other people, right?
hmm
And you have to be willing to go beyond the conventional idea of sanity, right? Like that, I've
yeah.
often said that awareness lies on the edge of sanity. I mean, you have to let go of the idea of being sane and insane in order to see what's there, because there's no such thing as insanity or sanity, right? Like it's just, we're just talking about cherry picking perspectives as what we like and what we don't like. It's like what you were saying about good and bad, right? Our perspective of good and bad always comes back down to what's pleasant or unpleasant for us, right? That's at the end of the day. And so because we view ourselves as separate, because we view ourselves as divided, death is terrifying. And so to us, everything that has to do with death is bad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Whereas there are other cultures that never looked at death in that way. They looked at it as something that had to happen. Krishnamurti's journal was actually a good place to look for that, because watching a funeral procession one day in India, and there was all the mourning and the sadness, and he was just thinking, like, it's such a shame that we can't recognize this is the inevitability of so much joy, that this in itself is something to almost celebrate, because it's the end of a journey, or it's the beginning of another journey. It's the completion of a ripple that causes other ripples to happen. Like we lose that because we focus on what we're attached to,
hmm
right?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't want to get. We're gonna get to certain places on this podcast, I'm sure, but
Oh yeah, hopefully.
do you
Oh, for
do
sure.
you so do you think, in that sense of Krishnamurti's explanation there, that we almost like over try to overprotect to the degree that everyone thinks death is objectively this horrible thing? I mean, I post that and I get a ton of DMs saying killing. That's like the one
Yeah.
response. Death is horrible. Death of loved ones and whatnot. And so, do you think we almost have become this society that's like overvalued
Mm, yeah.
life, like
Well,
individual lives,
control.
or
I would say we
yeah,
overvalue control. And it's interesting, because I did a video a long time ago when I first started TikTok, just kind of talking about how intention, the path, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? So,
yeah,
the reason we started agriculture was because up until that point, we had to live by the will of the land around us. If there wasn't enough food from year to year, our population diminished as a result. And that's what kept us in balance. And then we learned agriculture, and suddenly we had that taste of control. And so now we could just farm more food and less people in our tribe would die, which had to be a good thing, right? Like where nobody's dying, that's a bad thing. So people living has got to be a good thing. But then you look about 1,000 years later, and that tribe that people aren't dying in is suddenly amassed into many tribes that are 10,000 strong, and they're running out of land to grow food on. So now they're looking at their neighbors' territory who haven't been farming, who have smaller people who are still in balance, and they have to take over that territory. So all of a sudden now, in the name of not dying, we are killing. And we're justifying killing because we want their land. This is something, again, Krishnamurti said, is that progress is inevitably being fully armed on enemy lines. And eventually you need to expand into other territory, because progress never ends. The entire concept of progress is that we're always needing more. We're always doing more. It's like, when is enough enough? Right? So in our pursuit of avoiding death, we perpetuate death, right? In our pursuit of avoiding loss, we create more loss. And there's a balance in that. That's why the indigenous tribes in North America, they always looked at things in terms of 7 generations, right? Like if we're going to make a decision that's going to change how our tribe lives, whether it's, we're going to start farming oysters, or we're going to start, cutting down this particular part of the forest, which of course is not the point, but if we're going to do something, we need to consider how this is going to affect life generations down the road. And that's why, we look at their progression as a tribe to be a slow progression technologically. But the fact is that they didn't end up causing huge amounts of wars. They didn't pollute the crap out of the earth. They didn't, create an economy that became more important than their humanity. And it was because they lived within the idea that death is going to happen. But because we come from the earth and we return to the earth, we're never really dying, right? And that's why there was all this respect for their ancestors. There was a respect for their predecessors, the stories of before, right? It was because they saw themselves as an extension of it, rather than it happened before now. And if I die now, it's all over. And that's a Christian thing, right? Or rather, that's an egotistical thing. My old programming is there. I don't like Christianity. I've said that many times, right? But I feel like that about most monotheistic religions, because we focus on death like it's the point. Like a Christian's highest aspiration is often to die, because that's when they'll meet Jesus. And that's terrifying and really sad, because they're missing the entire point, or they're missing the kingdom, as it were, waiting for the kingdom that they're going to die and they have to start over again anyway.
Yeah.
Might as well enjoy it while you're here.
Exactly. Yeah. The idea of it's all, a lot of what we've just talked about is kind of tied together. The idea of thinking, we have this idea of control and thinking that we know what's best. And we have all these ideas of what's best and the right thing to do. And if we just do this, things will be good. And it's like, even when it comes to like, we're not getting into the topic we discussed, we're not going to get into, but something like, curing cancer, for example, objectively good thing, many would say, or curing, say, 10 of the most deadly diseases. All of a sudden we have a population issue, kind of like the same thing with the tribes, discovering agriculture, and all of a sudden there's not enough land and too many people and they start killing each other. So it's like people get so stuck on this idea of control and knowing what's best, and even down to the littlest thing of getting worried about a job interview, thinking that job is the best thing for you. And it's like, that job could be a horrible way to spend the next 2 years. And if you do you don't get it, then you might, find a job you do like. Yeah. And then it's like, well, then what do I do? It's just like, do your best and don't worry.
Exactly. Just shut up, move forward. That's pretty much it. That's try to relax as best you can. It's just like a car accident, right? You're going to get injured less the more relaxed you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bracing, trying to control how little moves inside of your body.
But that's it, right? And that's what we do with life. We build a little cage. We're like, I'm prepared now. It's like, no, you're brittle. You're easy to break. That's the problem, right? And this is why Jesus's whole thing of the meek shall inherit the earth, right? The meek are those who just adapt to the change. They don't worry about their preferences and their opinions. This is just what is. This is what needs to be done now, regardless of my belly aching or what I want to happen.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's just living in what is. But yeah, it's interesting. It's we are going to continue to have this problem so long as we don't recognize that we're all one, because that's the thing about our fear of death, is it really does stem from our overcommitment to the perception that we're divided, right? Like, you asked me if I'm afraid of death, and I said I'm not. And to be honest with you, the reason I'm not is because if I died right now, I would continue on as you and everybody else, right? And that's the whole reason I'm not afraid of death, because I'm not Ray, right? I experience Ray, but that's not me.
Yeah. So this idea, because a lot of people they'll say like, we're spiritual beings experiencing a human, and it's like, that's the same exact thing as just being a human. Essentially, it's just maybe you have less anxiety about it because you feel like you're not the human, but you're still an individual divided. And it's like, well, no, we're pieces of source. And it's like, to me, that seems closer.
It's closer.
But it's still, the spiritual being having a human experience. It's like, that's just like the same thing, just on a different sort of parallel
Big time.
path,
Yep.
you know?
I've said the same. I got a lot of hate for a comment or a video I made. I think probably a month or two after you started following me, but it was something along the lines that spirituality is not the same as awakening. Right? Spirituality is just another exercise in ego because it still perceives a division. It still perceives a me and the thing that I believe in, or me and the thing I'm an extension of. And again, it always comes back down to this. And I'm saying that all religion or all spiritual conversations, all conversations about awareness are going to revolve around the same very uncomfortable insight that it's really just you. And we try to avoid that. We're like, oh, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. It's like, okay, so what you've done is you've taken out some of the fear in perceiving yourself as a strictly physical being, which is great. And it means if you die, you're not going to die because you're not just your body. That's good. That's lowered the amount of stress in your life. That's fantastic. Now let's go an even step further and say that we don't even know what human being means, right? Because I don't. At the end of the day, I can describe it. I can describe the physicality of it, right? But I can't describe the conscious things that are available to me. I can't describe what's possible with this body, and we know that. We know that the body is capable of doing things that we still don't understand. Like there have been spontaneous healings. There have been all kinds of evidence that there in non-local awareness, like to be able to separate a part of a person's body, move it miles away, and then conduct a test on that person and have that person's body respond miles away at the exact same time implies that there is more happening than we are willing to look at, right? Because everything is connected. And so we're like, oh, I'm a human being. Like that answers the question. Like that does anything at all. It's all that's done is described the form, right? Like all I've done is limited myself to the form. I don't believe I'm a human being. I don't believe I'm anything. I'm just here. That whatever that might mean, I'm just here. And any concept I put on that is me just wanting to feel more comfortable. I just want to put in a box. That's all it is. And as soon as I do, I'm in a prison.
What about the idea of awareness?
Even that, it's just an idea, right? The description is never the described. And again, this is the reason I really enjoy talking to you, is because that question there is deeply uncomfortable for people. Like you just took all of the certainty that I offered our listeners in providing a nice conceptual ribbon, and you just open that package back up and you're like, okay, well, hold on a second. That's not an answer either. And you're right, it's not. Because we are not awareness. Awareness is just a word trying to describe the nature of what we are or what we perceive ourselves to be, right? And it's the closest we get. I used to use the word consciousness, right? But that caused all kinds of merry hell for me because as soon as I use the word consciousness, people think human consciousness. They think the way we think, right? Whereas awareness is just the basic awareness of being. It doesn't have to involve thought or identity or concepts or anything else, right? Like a plant is aware, like I was saying. So if we can break that down, if we can really look at the most basic elements of what awareness is, then we at least start to revolve around the point. But as you so eloquently pointed out, it's not the point, right? The point is still what remains underneath.
Yeah. So it's just like just what is sort of, and I feel like that's maybe the closest because I've been using awareness because I think that's the closest I've come to how it feels, sort of just an awareness. There's nothing about it. There's no form, thoughts, ideas. And yet, as I say, awareness, it's still just a thought, idea, word, just like everything else. But I think, I think it's maybe a little bit closer, but I guess the description of just, we are what is.
We are what is, and everything else is us trying to describe it or appreciate it or communicate it or come to some kind of an idea of what it is. But this is why our show is so appropriately named, because it's dualistic unity. It's the fact that it's all one thing that we experience in duality, that we perceive in duality, and that's the gift. See, that's the thing, is that, and this is a common sentiment in spiritual crowd is, this is my last incarnation on this planet. I'm done. Once I've learned all the lessons this time, and I always have the same expression on my face, like buckle up, your eternity. Like you don't get to leave. You just get to experience everything. So it's either you're going to do something with this lifetime or you're not. But this is not all there is, right? So you can get caught up in it or not. And oddly enough, it's when we stop getting caught up in the story we tell ourselves that we get the chance to change it. You know, we can actually make different decisions as soon as we start to let go of what we think our path is, because we're just blinding ourselves. Recently watched a movie, Free Guy. I don't know if you've seen it, with Ryan Reynolds.
I haven't, not yet. I do. I'm a big Ryan Reynolds fan.
My God, the movie's brilliant. It's just brilliant. And I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's very much this conversation in a symbolic form. It's really about seeing what's been in front of us the entire time when we let go of the narrative that we think is real. And that's unity at the end of the day. Every religion has said the same thing. It's just seeing past the division. It's just, well, every religion, every spiritual person who has become aware of themselves. Usually those are the people that religions are formed from. So I'm not going to give religion the same credit, because religion just works off of other people's hard work. But, you know, the people that religions are based upon are usually the people who have went, oh, this isn't anything like we think it is. You know, that's why often those people were just weird. You know, in general, like you had prophets who were walking around naked or walking around, you know, dirty half the time. And it's because they didn't care. They were too busy being full of fire at seeing what was in front of them. Yeah. And our culture would put those people in a rubber room.
Yeah, seriously. I know. I think about that sometimes. If, you know, if there was ever a second coming of Christ or something, would they ever notice? Given what he was actually saying, it's like, it's almost the opposite of, especially with in the West, how, you know, westernized Jesus has become. You know, he's like this,
you mean white
hippie
Jesus? Yeah.
yeah. It's like he's this Middle Eastern dude who's like probably did a ton of drugs and figured shit out. It's like,
Yeah.
he's become this good schoolboy who happened to have long hair.
Yeah. We're going to ignore the fact that he, you know, kicked over a table and started whipping people in a temple. Right?
Yeah.
By far my favorite Jesus story. Right? It's just, it's like, okay, so obviously he still had opinions. Yeah. Obviously he's still, and you know, I haven't made this TikTok post as yet, but it'd be a good conversation for our next podcast, I'm sure. Contrary to what Christians would like to say, I think Jesus screwed up. I think that Jesus screwed up. I think that he missed the window. I think that to some degree, what he was saying was true. I am the way, the truth, and the life. That I, and we are all the same I, is the only way, truth, and life that there will ever be, that we're all the same thing. But that he kept saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And as a result of being surrounded by egotistical people, they went, he is the way, the truth, and the life. And I think that it would be more effective, as we are doing now, to tell everybody else, you are the way, the truth, and the life. You are far more important than my perspective of me. You know, and that was the one thing that really changed for me between my video in 2005, which you mentioned at the beginning of the show, and now, was that back in 2005, there was still a lot of me. There was still a lot of I am awareness. I am the universe. I am. All that's changed is that I'm less and less attached to the idea of I. Right. Oddly enough, that's made things a lot easier for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. There's not too many fears and worries coming to that realization.
Right. Because I mean, what's the worst that can happen? I adapt.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Huh. Yeah.
I think this would be a good place to end episode 1. This has been a great conversation. And as our listeners can tell, we are going to get about as deep into stuff as we can. We're going to try and avoid the really uncomfortable bits, because I know that we're going to get some backlash for that, but we're going to skirt around them as much as we can. We're going to really deep dive on a lot of this stuff, because it's not a conversation that you really get to have in your day-to-day life. I've run across maybe a half dozen people in the last 20 years that I can talk to about this stuff. And even then, it's only to a certain limit. So I understand that there are going to be things that we're going to talk about on this show that aren't going to sit well with everybody, but I would ask that they give us a little bit of patience and indulgence, because given enough time, we will eventually bridge that gap and make it make sense from both perspectives. So
Yeah,
it's really just about exploring it, and coming back to the idea that there's nothing wrong with questioning so long as we're not trying to hold on to an answer.
exactly. And I think on that point, for people listening, if you are, specifically curious about a certain thing, feel free, DM us, comment on posts about this, questions that you have specifically. If there was something that was said, it's like, I kind of get this, but can you spend a little bit more time? And, we'd be happy to discuss further. I think there's an infinite amount of things that we're going to get into on here, barely scratching the surface. And I know I'm incredibly excited for
Me
what's
too.
to
I'm
come.
so excited. And again, the less that we think about ourselves, the more our audience is an extension of us, and we're all going to have this conversation together. We're having one collective conversation with ourselves.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's really good.